guys, it's your host Rashida Poonawala, and welcome back to another episode of Career Spotlight. Today we have a very special guest on the podcast. We have Comptroller Elaine Phillips. She has achieved so much in her career, so without further ado, let's dive into her journey. Start off with your early years and kind of talk to us a little bit about your childhood and what it was like for you growing up.
Great. So I was born and raised in Western Pennsylvania, way out almost in Ohio, and lost my father when I was 12 years old, and I was the youngest of four daughters. So I have to say my mother was very loving, but she was kind of tired of having children. So I was, didn't have a lot of guidance on where I was going to go. I ended up signing up to be a Rotary Exchange student. And so after I graduated from high school, I went to Brazil for a little over a year and lived with one Brazilian family. And I always tell people to this day that it was life-changing. I probably was going down a path that wasn't so good and came home with goals and aspirations. And I am the first in my family to go to college.
Wow, nice.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Thank you.
So can you talk to us a little bit more about your experience in Brazil and kind of what led you to going there and pursuing that?
So really, I had nothing to do once I was going to graduate from high school. I had applied to some colleges, but my mother didn't know how to tell me to do that. And sadly, it was a long time ago also. And we had an exchange student live with our family when I was like 8 years old. So I heard over the loudspeaker during the morning announcements that the Rotary Club was looking for applicants. And I thought, why not? And Brazil, I didn't even know where Brazil was when they told me I was going to Brazil. I didn't know what language they speak Portuguese. So 3 weeks before I left is when I found out where I was going. So it was a pretty big deal. I'd never been barely out of the state, more so than even out of the country. Yeah, it was scary at first, but a wonderful, wonderful family I lived with.
Is there a specific life lesson or anything that you've learned or something that kind of opened your eyes while you were at Brazil?
Yeah, it gave me an opportunity to, I want to say, mature out a little bit. Not that at 18 you have to be mature, but it allowed me an opportunity without peer pressure to be what I wanted to be. And I'm going to give a quick story. So one of my daughters was playing some sport here at Manhasset once, years ago. And I had a car full of girls. And one of the quieter girls, it was her senior year. And I must have said to her, honey, what are you thinking about doing next year? And she said, I'm going to college. And Mrs. Phillips, I'm so looking forward to it because I can finally be who I want to be. Yeah. And I thought, wow, what a message for a 17-year-old to say. But I think that was true for me too. In high school, I kind of gotten pegged as this type of person. Yeah. And that year abroad gave me an opportunity with guidance from a very solid family to say, well, what did I really want to be like? What did I want to be known for? So that was probably the lesson.
Wow. That's actually quite inspiring because as a senior, I'm going to college as well next year, and I feel like a lot of our listeners are. I think that it's really important to use college to kind of find yourself, especially once high school, you're kind of in some sort of constraint of who you want to be and kind of peer pressured into being a certain way because of people you're around. So.
Right, or people that have known you since you were 6 years old. So they just assume you're like X.
Yeah.
When really you might be a little X, but Y also. Yeah, it's really, and just to be exposed, one, a new language, and having to make decisions, about, did I want to do this? Or, it was great.
So after that, you ended up going to Penn State to pursue a degree in political science and government, and then later pursue an MBA in finance. So can you again talk to us a little bit more about why did you choose to study government initially, and then how did that evolve into wanting to pursue a degree in finance as well?
Right. So I came back from Brazil and school had already started. So there was a branch campus of Penn State, my hometown. And so I needed to work because we didn't have any money. So I needed to work. So I got a job and I went in and they said, look at me because I'm speaking with this weird accent. And by then, and they enrolled me. And in that time, Penn State was in trimesters. So, and I had to take a language, and they didn't have Portuguese, so I took French. And this French professor, he was constantly correcting the way I said similar Romantic language words that were similar in Portuguese and French. I was saying it qui, and he was que. And, but I think I saw something in him, a young woman that was ambitious and brighter than maybe my background had given me the opportunities. So he got me onto the main campus. So it's not like I really thought, I'm going to go to Penn State, which is a great school. Yeah. We are Penn State. Mm-hmm. It was more, I kind of fell into it. And because now I had this, I was still dreaming in Portuguese, and I had all this exposure to Brazil, traveled extensively when I was there. So, I took the basic core courses that you have to on a liberal arts degree, and I took a political science course, and I realized this was really the way I wanted. I was a good enough writer at the time, so those essay-type exams. So my undergraduate degree is in political science with a Latin American emphasis. Okay. So I took the majority of my higher level political science classes in kind of third world politics with an emphasis. And I had a work study program through, financial aid. And there was a professor in the political science department, actually 2 faculty members, that worked very closely with the Venezuelan government and their Democratic Party. So I got, it just kind of all went from there. Graduated, hard to get a job with a political science degree. So this professor got a grant to do a documentary on the economic impacts of the third world on the state of Pennsylvania. So interesting, Eastern Pennsylvania years ago manufactured a lot of shoes. So as third world countries began to manufacture more shoes, it was impacting the economy of Pennsylvania. Anyway, worked for a PBS station 1 year. And then a friend of mine's boyfriend was studying for his, not his MCATs, his GMATs. And he said, you can get this degree and get a job. So that's how I ended up. And Penn State paid for my degree through forget what they call it, internship. So I worked for a little mini television studio, similar to your studio. Here we had cameras and we had editing boards. So that's what paid my way.
Can you talk to us a little bit about your experience at that TV station and kind of what that was like
So really, I was the manager of it. So I was hiring other MBA students. So it wasn't like hiring 18-year-olds. I was hiring some people that were 25 to 30 plus year olds, MBA students that had engineering backgrounds, physics backgrounds, and here I was. So it was a real learning lesson on managerial skills, leadership skills, but I also got to do a lot of editing, and I learned how Sparkomatic was a company out of Pennsylvania. We got to do a TV commercial for them. So, yeah, it was fun.
How was it, as you mentioned, like all these people were probably 25, 30. How was it being a fresh, like, undergrad student, like, having to work and, like, deal with people that were so much older than you?
Scary. Yeah, so to get them to trust and respect me enough. So here I was, 21, undergrad, 1 year, 22 when I started my MBA, 22 or 23. So, and I had probably a part-time staff of 8 or 10. So yeah, so I had to listen, listen to them and what they needed, and how their class schedule was, and work around that, be organized so they felt like the manager of the studio was really serious and took their concerns into consideration.
Did you ever feel like you had to, like, prove yourself more since you were so young in that role?
Absolutely. So it made me work maybe a little harder, and definitely we had a professor who was the advisor, so, utilized him quite a bit. But, there were things I did wrong. So that's okay. You learn. Yeah. And I had a lot of forgiving employees.
That's really, like, cool. And that you're also able to get that experience of being a manager and working with people at such a young age as well.
Right.
So you also had a very successful career on Wall Street before you made it into public life. Can you talk to us about that experience, and for students that aspire to be on Wall Street, like, what was the secret sauce to, like, your success?
Right. So when I graduated, my second year of business school was when you do your interviewing. And, because I didn't really have real work experience other than managing this television studio and, working for this PBS station, I was kind of all over the place. I do have my MBA, which is a general business degree with an emphasis in finance. So I was looking at banks. So in the end, I had 2 job offers. One with IBM, actually in their finance team, but working with their engineers. And I think the reason I got that job offer was because I ran the television studio. So I had a lot of engineer, undergrads. And that was in upstate New York. And then I had this other offer to work for Metropolitan Insurance Company. So you think an insurance company, but at the time they were the largest in their investment department in New York City. So you've heard me say this before, 24-year-old upstate New York or New York City. So there was no question I was taking New York City. So I spent 4 years at MetLife. Great. They bought a company out in California. They moved me to California. They moved me back. And then that's considered the buy side of Wall Street when it comes to securities firms. And then I had an opportunity to go to JP Morgan to the sales side. So I worked on a trading desk. We created this mortgage-backed securities department. And then after 4 years, I made a lateral move to Goldman Sachs. So I spent the bulk of my career at Goldman, great firm, had all three of my children. I tell this story. I worked full-time, I worked part-time, and I job shared for 8 or 9 years. So was able to, but I say the secret to success in any job, but particularly, these fast-paced billions of dollars of transactions we were doing daily was honesty. And I'm going to repeat that, honesty, hard work, having humility, but you have to be honest. As soon as you start going down a path that you start saying things that you think your client, whatever your client is, you're going to just not be successful. So my clients didn't always like what I had to say, but I was always honest with them.
I feel like that's such like an important quality and trait to have is honesty. So then even like people will also trust you more, even if like sometimes I guess you have to tell people the hard truth and you can't sugarcoat everything.
No.
So can you talk to us a little bit about, you mentioned that you had to job share at Goldman. So can you talk to us a little bit about what that was like and what that experience taught you?
So it was after I had my second daughter, my hours were long hours. So I took, we were living here in Manhasset right after I had my second daughter, but I used to take the 5:44 a.m. train and not get home till maybe the earliest 6:30, 7 o'clock. So, and my husband worked for BlackRock, so he was traveling all over the world. So we knew one of us, somebody's career had to give for a little bit, and we talked about it. And so I said, look, I'd like to spend more time with the girls. So Goldman was great. It gave me like a junior person to work with me. And I worked 4 days a week, but then 3 days a week. And so finally, it was just I had a third child. Yeah. It just became too much. So I left and was home full-time for 2.5 years. And look, everyone is different, so there is no judging here. But for me personally, it was not good for our family for me to be home full-time. I needed something different. Yeah. So I went back to Goldman and I said, help. So I was going to do something in the training program, but a woman, a senior, it was in sales, institutional sales, was going out on maternity leave, and the maternity leave was 4 months. And they said she covered big clients, about 6 big clients. So they said, would you come back for the 4 months she was out? My first day back was 9/11. So what a day to go back, huh? Crazy. And then I have these 3 little girls at home. Do I really go back? A lot of decisions. Anyway, went back, worked for her full-time for 4 months. Markets were crazy because of 9/11. So I ended in January, went home. And Goldman was like, things were still pretty crazy in the global markets. Just call us in 2-3 weeks. So this woman called me and said, what about job sharing? I think they'll let us do it. 2 other women had done it in the Chicago office, but not as high-powered position we would be doing it in. So we proposed it, and they said, we'll give you a trial period. So for 8 or 9 years later, I worked 2 days, she worked 3 days. We shared a compensation package, and it was great.
Wow.
Yeah, it was great.
That was really cool too for Goldman to let you do that.
Amazing. And when I talk to employers now, I bring it up a lot because it was such a creative way to keep two senior employees, two senior women employees. And in those days, it was hard to have women stay at the firm.
Yeah.
And honestly, they surely got more from us because, we would do things above and beyond just to make it work. So it worked out really. And to this day, I owe Goldman my gratitude for keeping me there as long as they did. Yeah.
So you mentioned you have 3 girls
Yep.
who all, as we were just talking about, went to Manhasset. So can you talk to us a little bit about how you balanced that, as well as also right now you're back at the school for summer studies. So talk to us a little bit more about giving back to the community.
Yeah. So yeah, all 3 girls, I will say they're successful. One is a PhD clinical psychologist. The other one is an MD in her residency. And the third one works for a big sports and entertainment agency in London.
Wow.
So Manhasset did, and granted they went to great colleges, but, Manhasset did them well, despite, I think at the time, them thinking that. So I do feel like I owe my community give back. And you haven't asked me this, but I know you're going to. I started giving back at the SEA, and then I became a trustee. We were living in Muncie Park, and then I became a trustee in the Village of Flower Hill, and then I became the mayor. But I bring that up before you ask only because none of that was there any compensation. So, we are blessed to live in a great community. So it's imperative that each and every one of us uses whatever skill sets we have, because yours is different than mine, it's different than somebody else's, and give back as much as we can. So, for me to give back to the school district is harder because, how many kids, it's been a long time. So when I was asked to interview, and, there's 6 of us or 8 of us interviewing, we all have different skill sets. There's a father who's chairs the ER department at Cornell Hospital and is dean of the School of Medicine. There was another father who's the CEO of a local university. Was a mom who is an urban planner by trade. There's another mom who runs a big school. There's a former teacher. So we all come at it from different ways.
Yeah, and different perspectives.
Different perspectives, different types of questions, so it was good.
That's really great that you are also able to give back and still stay connected to
it's really nice,
the community.
Which is why I thank you, Rashida, for having me here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Really appreciate it.
Okay, so back in 2016, you stepped into public office. What motivated you? I guess you kind of touched on this, but maybe explain a little bit more, what motivated you to kind of step into office, especially transitioning from the public sector and working in finance?
Yeah. So it really was 2006 when I became a trustee, and that was purely by chance. The then mayor of Muncie Park needed to appoint a trustee. I'm not even sure at the time my husband and I knew that there was a mayor of our village. I mean, we were so busy with 3 little girls, both of us working. So he approached me. So I always kind of jokingly blame Harry Nicolaides for getting me involved in government. And as I said, I was a trustee there, and then we moved to Flower Hill. Then the then mayor called me and asked me he needed to appoint, and then nobody wanted to run for mayor, so they were like, Elaine, you have to run for mayor. So it was an interesting tie back to my undergraduate degree in political science. And I also by then had, more time on my hands too. And I always tell people that I learned more about constituent services, giving back, listening to constituents as a local mayor of 5,000 people in the village than I did as a New York State senator or now as the Nassau County Comptroller. I mean, it really, it's boots on the ground. You go to the deli and somebody from Flower Hill is telling you, why didn't you fix the street lights, even though we don't have street lights in Flower Hill. Anyway, and then I had our New York State Senator, who is actually our New York State Senator again, Senator Jack Martins, was making a decision to run for Congress. And I had gotten to know him a little bit. He had gotten me some grants for the village and called me up and said he was going to run for Congress and asked for a favor. And I said, sure. And he said, I want you to run for my Senate seat. So it's the 7th Senate District. It's about 240,000 people. It's the northwest quadrant of Nassau County. So it kind of goes from the tip of Kings Point to down the Cross Island through part of Elmont, all the way across kind of Mineola up to Hicksville, and then kind of heads north again. And I will say, never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I would run for the New York State Senate. I tell this story, you've heard it. Yes. I went home to speak to my, said I got to speak to my family. My youngest daughter was in college already, less I would have done it because I was up in Albany 6 months out of the year. And my husband said, look, what's the downside? You're going to meet so many people, so many organizations. I'll still love you. The girls will still love you if you lose. And the dog will still love you if you lose. So with a lot of effort, a lot of money, we won that election. And, I spent a little bit of time in the New York State Senate. I then lost a re-election. We had a wave. I don't want to make this political, but it was the opposite party that I run on, and all the state senators, we got wiped out in kind of this Long Island, Westchester area. Yeah. So I went back into the private sector, and 4 years ago, they called me and asked me to run for Nassau County Comptroller. And I thought, do I do it again? And really didn't know what the controller's role was, but I'm so glad I did. And it's truly an honor to serve the people of Nassau County.
So can you actually talk to us a little bit about, which was actually my next question, talk to us a little bit more about the role of Comptroller of Nassau County and what that role looks like?
Yeah, so the top priority, so it's an independently elected position. Not all county controllers are elected position, but mine is. And as is Suffolk County, just as an example. Yeah. So we have a county executive, we have the county controller, we have the Nassau County District Attorney, and the Nassau County Clerk. Those are the 4 elected positions countywide. And for those of you that don't know, Nassau County by population is larger than 10 states in the United States, 1.4 million plus people. Our GDP is greater than 140 countries in the United Nations. We have a $4.4 billion budget. So this is like being the CFO of a major corporation. So it was a little daunting, right?
I'm sure.
And there was no question a learning curve, but really the priorities of a controller, government controller, is preventing waste, fraud, and abuse, improving efficiencies to save our taxpayers money. So that's kind of the overriding. I have all vendor claims go through my department, so anyone that has to be paid, we process about 120,000 claims a year, and that's anything from buying muffins for the jail to buying helicopter parts for the police department. So it's all ranges. We do all payroll for the employees. We do all health benefits for our current employees, plus all retirees and their families, so about 45,000 covered lives. We do all the accounting for the county. We close the books. We're the final say on the finances of the county, and we have an audit function. So I can go in and audit any vendor or any department within Nassau County or does business with Nassau County to prevent fraud and abuse.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive. Like, quite an impressive resume you have of all of these different roles that you've been able to step into and be very successful at everyone. Can you talk to us a little bit about, like, you've been in so many roles, you've had a bunch of leadership roles. What are important to have, like, as a leader in those roles, and what have, like, these leadership roles taught you? And
so I've gotten better at it. I really have. I'm not sure 20 years ago or 40 years ago I had some of these skill sets. So I think it's learning from others, learning from your mistakes. Leadership is listening. I say this to both males and females, girls and boys, women and men, listening. But sometimes women don't always take opportunities when they're presented. We have a tendency, this is a big generalization, we have a tendency of saying, are we really prepared for it before we say yes? Men are a little more quick to jump into roles, and I think that's held women back a little bit from executive management roles. So I think always say I speak to a lot of women's group because I'm the first woman to be elected Nassau County Controller, first woman to ever be the state senator in the 7th Senate District, and only the second woman to ever be a New York State Senator from Long Island. Might be Hollow, but Long Island. And the first woman to be mayor of Flower Hill. So I have a lot of firsts in that respect. So I speak at a lot of women's group, and it's really important when opportunity knocks. Don't grab something you're not prepared for, but don't be afraid to say yes also. Putting a team around you that complements me. I have 3 deputy controllers. I have my chief legal counsel around me. I have my communication team. And none of them are really like me, but it works as a team. So I think those are all skills that are really helpful when you're developing your leadership skills.
Yeah, and I totally agree. Like, especially in like such leadership roles, to have like other people with different ideas, perspectives to collaborate with, I think is really important.
Really important. I agree with you. Yeah. Yeah.
So, can you also talk to us a little bit about how you were able to balance, as you said, you are a mother of 3, wife. How did you balance all these amazing career goals as well as being able to be a prominent figure in your personal life?
Yeah, it's probably a question you should ask my adult daughters. But, we all know our limits.
Yeah.
And sometimes we stretch them, and other times we, stay more balanced. So one, I have a very supportive husband.
Yeah.
So finding a partner that supports each other is really critical in life. I also had great, nannies. It takes a village to raise children. I do think my daughters, I attribute some of their success from having a role model at home. So that's good. You haven't asked yet, but, I have this other thing I do in life, which is martial arts.
Yes.
So I am a martial artist. I don't say I do martial arts. I am a martial artist, and I started 29 years ago. So when my second daughter was 1 year old, and I really did it initially for exercise, but in self-defense because I was traveling into the city. But I've realized in martial arts, there's a huge value. We live by certain values in our everyday life. And those same values of courage, concentration, endurance, but honesty and humility. So I laugh sometimes in the political world. So I'm a true believer in good government. I would say I'm a better practitioner of government versus a politician. I don't particularly like the gamemanship of politics. I like being able to serve people. So sometimes, especially during campaigns, this year is another campaign. I'm going to run again for another 4 years.
Good luck.
Thank you. Everybody vote in November, please. And but sometimes the political advisors, now they don't say it as much to me, but they're like, Elaine, you're not tough enough. And I laugh because I can protect myself in any situation. But in martial arts, we believe in strong on the inside, but soft on the outside. Now, that doesn't mean our hands and our muscles aren't strong, but we don't walk around. I'm a 6th-degree black belt,
Wow.
and I do not walk around kind of going, oh, I'm a 6th-degree black belt, blah, 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 move out of my way. If anything, I try to show humility every day. So someone may read into that as not being strong enough.
Yeah.
I don't. I read into it as having enough self-confidence that I can speak about my role. I mean, you just heard a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of my roles, but I don't have to boast about my roles. Sometimes you have to talk about it, lest people don't know. So having that exercise, having that belt system in martial arts was really important to me. Yeah. Being able to work for a goal. it also pulled me back down. So when my life would be crazy, getting up in the morning, if I saw the girls, depending on where, if I was working 2 days a week, I saw them those 3 days. When I was working 5 days, I'd see them in the evening. And to be able to bring myself down enough and focus on them for whatever window I had with them just brought tremendous, and it's still, I train with my instructors still 3 days a week, and then I teach an additional 3 classes a week. So I am, my chief of staff knows that there are times where she cannot schedule me. And look, something really important I had to be at, I would, skip class, but rarely do I. Yeah, because I need that. Yeah.
It centers you. And
centers me.
Yeah.
Yes.
In the midst of the chaos, it centers you, and I feel it gives you a sense of peace.
Yes.
And alone time.
Yes. All of the above. Yeah.
So, if you weren't in public service or finance, what do you think you'd be doing right now?
I jokingly think, I'd love to be a professional golfer, but my golf game's not very good. I don't, maybe by now I'd be, running a martial arts school is very possible. But I think I'd be involved in something, life, used to be the old day where you went to one company and you stayed there 50 years, and that is admirable if somebody does that, truly. And if you can find your career path at one firm or one organization or one whatever, good for you. Mine has been, it's kind of zigged and zagged a lot. And, but I think it's, because I kept my eyes open and my ears open, and when opportunity did knock,
you
took it. Yeah. And you have to make it. It's, I'm a bit of an idealist that, I do believe opportunities come to you. At the same time, you have to be looking for them also. Yeah.
So this has been a great conversation. Thank you so
Rashida.
much.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for listening to me too. Yes.
But I have one final question to wrap things up. So what is one piece of advice you would like to leave our listeners with?
So you had given me a little forewarning that you were going to possibly ask that question. And my initial thought was, make sure you utilize in your career path friends and family, alumni. But then decided I'm going to share a story with your listeners. And so I, every summer in this controller's role, have several summer interns. And they're college. Usually we can get them between freshman and sophomore year because they're data analytics positions. So chances are they're going to go into investment banking or engineering or something. So by sophomore summer, they're somewhere else. I don't pay that well. But it's great for the resume. So this summer, we actually hired more than we normally do. We have 6 of them.
Wow.
And as I said, I usually get business majors or analytics, IT, computer science, engineering majors. But for the first time, an individual with is getting, in this case, was him. He's getting a degree in public policy. And I thought, isn't that interesting? Even though I'm a controller, I'm constantly kind of making public policy decisions. So do we have a project that's good enough and will keep him busy enough? And it was from a very good college. And so I had some of my staff interview him. They really liked him. And so they said, Comptroller Phillips, you should be one of the next round. You should be involved. And I said to him, I'm interviewing him, and I said, please call me Elaine. And we're interviewing and got off. And as we were, a day or two later, I got a thank you email from him. And it was, Dear Elaine. Not Dear Comptroller Phillips, not Dear Comptroller Elaine Phillips, not Dear Mrs. Phillips, not Dear Ms. Phillips. And look, we were all raised differently. Some of us were taught that it was absolutely appropriate to call your friends' parents by the first names, as long as they were okay. Some of us were taught you always say Mr. and Mrs. So it's possible because I said, call me Elaine. But here is a student in college writing to the Comptroller of Nassau County, and I'm trying to be humble right now, but this elected official who is potentially going to give him or her a job, and they make a decision to be that informal. And I didn't give him a job. So the risk of me telling your listeners this story is that, boy, she's old-fashioned. It's not old-fashioned.
Respect.
It's respect for whoever the employer is, because you don't know. So it is much easier to stay ultra formal until you understand, you get the job first, and then into the job. And even there, as a summer intern, you never know when you're going to need that recommendation, or that employer knows somebody who lives in California and you're moving to California, whatever the case. So the moral of the story is, don't write a prospective employer by their first name.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think that is a very important thing, to just have respect for whoever you're talking with. Whoever it is.
Yeah. So that's my gift to your listeners.
Well, thank you so much
Yours.
for sharing your story and advice and knowledge from the past years of your career. But I just want to say thank you again for coming on Career Spotlight.
Thank you, Rashida. Great opportunity. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Please get out and vote if you're 18 or older in November.
Yeah. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Once again, that's all I have for you guys today. I'm your host, Rashida Poonawala, signing off.